As we've learned as University of Texas fans over the past 72 hours, the transfer portal giveth, but it also taketh away.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are discussing the transfer portal on the good side and the bad side. Just two segments today. Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan from the football team have announced their intention to enter the portal. And then Jordan Pope, one of the best point guards in the country, is leaving Oregon State and headed to the 40 acres. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And happy NFL Draft Day, right? This only comes once a year, I guess, at least the first round. So, obviously everybody that's watching this podcast likes football at least a little bit, right? So happy NFL Draft Day. Hopefully we get to see at least three NFL players, or at least three Texas Longhorn players drafted in the first round tonight. Now, we're here to talk about Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan and Savion Red as well, entering the portal, even though that came a few days ago. And I guess Terrance Brooks came a few days ago as well, and then Austin Jordan was the most recent announcement. But typically, as football fans, especially in this new, transfer portal era, and we're all on social media, or, at least most of us are, I guess the default when a player from your school enters the portal or leaves is to say that, oh, they weren't going to move the needle for us, or they weren't going to play, or we'll be just fine. We have a bunch of talent in the room, right? And that's been the truth at the University of Texas for the most part, because we have not lost a high-profile starter to the transfer portal until potentially this week, right? We had never lost a player that had started a full season for us. We had never lost a player to the portal that we had a clear plan for, or a player that we were expected to rely on heavily the next, coming up season until potentially this week, right? So for the last 3 years, Texas fans have been able to say that any player entered the portal, although I think it's cheesy regardless, but any player that entered the portal was not necessarily going to move the needle for us, and Texas would be just fine, right? And we have been correct in that sentiment over the last 3 years, right? The most Texas has had to deal with in terms of potentially losing great players to the portal is that NIL scare we had after the 2022 season, where we went 8-5, where it seemed like Jahdae Barron and Xavier Worthy were ready to jump ship, right? We heard Xavier Worthy and USC rumors every year he was at the University of Texas. And then allegedly, Oregon offered, Jahdae Barron upwards of $200,000 to enter the portal and come to Oregon. And it seems like he at least considered it, right? So that's been, I guess, the apex of our transfer portal scares dealing with this football team the last few years. But I do think that the losses of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan are losses that have the potential to affect the quality of your football team. We have a lot of talent in the room. We may be just fine. We also may not be just fine, because I think Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan are really good players, and at worst are really good depth for you at a very important position on this Texas football team, a position that we saw not look too great, right? The last time they were on the field for real against Washington. Now, I guess the counter argument to that would be that one of those players on the field not looking great was Terrance Brooks, but nonetheless, players of that caliber, Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan, don't just grow on trees, and I guess we'll see how those two losses affect the quality of the football team this year. Savion Red, on a lesser note, who has also announced his, intention to enter the portal since the orange and white game. I think he's a really good player. I think he had a defined role on this football team in the Wildcat or the Red Cat, whatever you want to call it. But you also have 5 really, really good players in that room, right? 6 if you count Kai Woods, who was a walk-on. But, Christian Clark, Jared Gibson, Seth Baxter, Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner. It's just hard to say you will, miss Savion Red that much with those 5 names I just mentioned. But nonetheless, he's a really good player, and I hope all 3 of these players land on their feet and have success elsewhere if it's not at the 40 acres. I think when you look at the Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan situation, I do think for the first time we have lost players to the portal that really might have an impact on the quality of this football team at the corner spot, right? When you look at it, Terrance Brooks was a starter all season for us last year, right? He started 13 out of 14 games, if I remember correctly. And even though it didn't end on the best note, right? We saw him in the Washington game getting ate up, right? Getting cooked, right? We saw him Really his lasting memory at the University of Texas is Arch Manning throwing a 75-yard bomb on him to DeAndre Moore, right? Whether it was on him or not, whether it was, a coverage bust or not, like he and his jersey and his picture and Brooks with the number 8 is in that screenshot, right? Of DeAndre Moore looking up at the ball and nothing but green grass between them, right? So that's his lasting memory at the University of Texas, fair or not, giving up a 75-yard touchdown. But nonetheless, right, overall, right, like if you just look at the full package of what Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan brought to the University of Texas, it was positive, right? And that was a player that was good enough to start for you in one of your best seasons in over a decade. And so I would think that he could still provide value to this football team. But, I understand that both sides have to be invested in that, and just doesn't seem like that's the case moving forward between Texas and Terrance Brooks. And then, Austin Jordan, like I said, was just really good depth that, maybe feels like he can play in a bigger role or succeed in a bigger role somewhere else, right? At the end of the day, all of these players have to do what's best for them first and what's best for the university second, right? And this is a case of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan doing what's best for them, right? It's been reported that the decision between Brooks and Texas was mutual. I'm not sure how true that is. I'm not sure if it's PR or not, but, based on what I've heard, there probably could be some credence to that. There were some rumblings about NIL dissatisfaction. I have no opinion on that. As human beings, as civilians, if we feel underpaid, we're going to look for opportunities to where we can be paid what we think we're worth. And so athletes, they're going to do the same thing, especially now that they have the power to do that in college football. If you feel like you're underpaid, you're going to go somewhere where you feel like you're rightfully paid, right? And then also overall frustration with changes in his role, which makes a ton of sense, right? He started 13 games last season, and now we see him running with the second group in the spring, right? And so it's like when you go from being a starter on a really good football team to then coming back and them saying, oh, no, I think you're better suited for the second group. I can understand why you would be frustrated about that and why you would want to move on to somewhere where you can get the opportunity to showcase you're a really good corner, especially when he's getting into, these years that are his contract years, right? He's draft eligible at the end of the year, right? So does it make sense for him to get demoted to the second team and just take it, right? And knowing that could, really affect his draft stock, or go somewhere else where he can play football and prove he's one of the best corners in college football, right? I think that's the best case scenario for Terrance Brooks. And based on what's being reported by Inside Texas and Orange Bloods, it might be what's best for Texas as well, or at least they think so. And I think that some huge question marks have been left by these two transfers, right? I think Texas has a ton of talent in the room, of course, right? We may be just fine, right? But I don't think you can just say that immediately after losing two really talented players in Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan. So I think that those two departures have asked, posed some questions, I guess, for the Texas football team. The first thing is, how did this all go downhill so fast, right? It was just 3 months ago that Terrance Brooks was penciled in as a starter for the 2024 football team heading into the SEC. It was just 3 months ago that, we said, even though he didn't have a great end to the season, right, we expected Terrance Brooks to bounce back and, be a really good corner for us in college football this year. It was just 3 months ago that Jabbar Muhammad, the number one corner in the portal, or one of the best corners in the portal, was interested in coming to the University of Texas, coming back home and playing with his cousin, Malik Muhammad. And Jabbar Muhammad was told that he would have to compete for snaps with Terrance Brooks or rotate for snaps with Terrance Brooks. And now, just 3 months later, neither one of them are going to be playing in a Texas jersey this season. So how did we go from 3 months ago telling Jabbar Muhammad that if he came here, he would have to rotate with Terrance Brooks, to 3 months later, Terrance Brooks not even wanting to be here, and Texas allegedly, right, being okay with that decision? How did that happen in 3 short months? I'm not questioning it. I'm not calling BS or anything like that. I'm just asking, how did it all go downhill so fast in 3 months? Literally nothing to read between the lines. Those are literally the lines. Like, what happened like over the last 3 months, right? My second question is, are Jahdae Barron and Gavin Holmes the answer at outside corner, right? They have to be now, right? Because you just lost Terrance Brooks, and you've kind of penciled in Jalen Gilbo at the start position. I think Gavin Holmes was a solid player at Wake Forest. I do not think he was a solid player for us last year, but everybody said he's had a great spring. I think he was good in the spring game, and I think people think that he may be a better option at that outside corner spot than Terrance Brooks, who is bigger, right? Because he's faster and can cover more space and cover more grass on that boundary, right? It's either the field. I always get confused with the field or boundary corners, but it's one of them. And then I think it's the field corner. And then I think, with Jahdae Barron, I think he has the potential to play outside corner. He's obviously a really good defender, a really smart defender. And part of him coming back was, him being able to show his ability to play on the outside and not being labeled as just a slot corner in the National Football League, right? Or going into the draft process, you don't want to just be labeled as a slot corner. Whether that's best for the actual Texas football team or if that's just best for Jahdae Barron, I don't know, right? But it seems like we're catering to players' draft stocks maybe over what's best for the team. Even though I did say in the earlier part of the week that I do think that Jahdae Barron and Jalen Gilbo and Malik Muhammad are your three best corners and should start that way, right? We still don't know what we're going to get from Jahdae Barron at outside corner because we haven't seen it. Right. And then Gavin Holmes wasn't great last year. So you're projecting that he's going to be good this year based off of a really good spring. That could be the case. It could not be the case. Right. And another counter argument that was made by Steven from Fanatic Perspective in our group chat is if Jahdae Barron was good enough to play outside corner, why have we not tried it in the last 3 to 4 years? He has been here since the Tom Herman era. If he was good enough to play outside corner, you don't think the staff would have noticed that by now and put him in that position? I think maybe he was always best suited at star, but now we have a need to put him on the outside, and he has a need to play on the outside for his draft stock. But I don't think any of us can say that that's the best scenario for the university. I don't want to say that because I actually came on here and said that I think that's the best case scenario for the University of Texas. But I don't think any of us can say without a shadow of a doubt that Jahdae Barron will be a better outside corner than Terrance Brooks because we haven't seen enough of him at that position, right? Same thing with Gavin Holmes. We haven't seen him play at a high level at outside corner at the University of Texas to just assume he'll do it because Terrance Brooks entered the portal. Can Jalen Gilbo give you Barron-like production at star while staying healthy, right? Now that Jahdae Barron, it's, pretty much solidified he's going to be playing on the outside. He's one of our best players on this defense the last 2 years in that star position. Can Jalen Gilbo give you that Jahdae Barron type production at the star position while also staying on the field? And then my last question is, who are your first corners off the bench, right? This is a position that rotate. We rotate a lot on defense, especially in the earlier part of the season, given that heat, right? So who are your first corners off the bench now, right? Now that you just lost 2 really good players that were in your 2 deep, I guess, to the transfer portal. Is it Gavin Holmes, right? I guess based on what we're hearing, yes, he would have to be one of those players. But then after that, I feel like it's really bleak, right? It's Warren Robertson, who's a converted safety, who hasn't played a high-level snap at the University of Texas yet. And then Kobe Black, who's a true freshman, has been on campus, been in college for 3 months, period, right? Those are your 3 first corners off the bench, right? That is your important depth that you're going to rely on to make huge plays for the Texas football team this year. I'm not sure, right? I would imagine they're going to go into the portal and look for some reinforcements, look for another corner to come in and, compete with, people in that room. But nonetheless, I think, the departures of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan left some huge question marks on this football team. And there's a ton of talent in that DB room, a ton of talent in that cornerback room. So we may be just fine. But when you lose players with the talent level of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan, I think you have to take a wait and see approach on if that's truly the case. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we talk about the good side of the transfer portal. Jordan Pope leaving Oregon State and headed to the 40 acres. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic dub. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is also brought to you by Gametime, right? Download the Gametime app and save instantly on tickets. And for my money, I believe Gametime is the best ticketing app in the industry. They do so many things for you to make your ticketing experience the best in the business. Priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats with all-in price link. Toggling the feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And now it's baseball season. My favorite thing to do is look up local baseball tickets an hour before the game and grab cheap tickets and great seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so the first segment was like kind of depressing. I wonder if I should have switched the orders of them, but then it's like basketball doesn't move the needle like football does. So football was the most important, but it like, felt like I was talking for 13 minutes about, how the Texas football team lost two really good players, right? And then I had to like keep throwing a disclaimer in there of like, we might be fine, without them. Hopefully we're fine without them because I'm still a Texas fan without those two players. But damn, man, like Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan, that was like a little mini earthquake for me, like maybe category 2 or 3, but it's definitely a mini earthquake. Because like when you normally see these announcements of players entering the portal, I mean, like I said, at Texas, there's been players that, were talented, but we just didn't have room for it, right? Or, when you have 4 to 5 good players in every room, right, you can't expect all of them to stay, right? So there have been players where they've entered the portal, you've been like, damn, like, I really like them coming out of high school, but there's just no room for him. But there's room for Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan. We've seen that the last 2 years, right? So, yeah, man, we'll see. We'll see. All right, talking about the basketball team, right? Let me put a smile on my face and uplift this podcast, right? Jordan Pope, one of the best point guards in the country, has committed to the 40 acres. They are going all in this year. Maybe it's the first year in the SEC. Maybe it's knowing you only have Trey Johnson, an all-world, type prospect for one season. Whatever it is, I really appreciate the investment of the administration, right? Obviously, in this NIL era, these players are getting paid, right? They're not just committing to the University of Texas because they love Austin, right? So they're obviously getting paid, but, that takes buy-in, right? That takes buy-in from the top. That takes buy-in from CDC down, right? Or the president down, right? How much are we going to invest into our basketball program? How much are we going to invest into NIL? How much do we want to be competitive, right? How much do we want to invest in going out and getting the best players in the country to take our program to another level, right? Based on what we've seen the last 3 years, I think we can all reasonably conclude that this administration is invested in promoting this basketball program and elevating this basketball program to one of the best in the country, right? You don't bring in 4 high-profile players out of the transfer portal and the number 6 recruit in the country in the same year without dishing out some dollars, right? So, salute to the staff, Rodney Terry and his staff, just do an excellent job, a tireless job of recruiting that has worked out really well, over the last couple of seasons at the 40 acres. And once again, just shout out to the administrations for being invested into this program, right? There's a lot of programs that are, I don't know if I want to put money into the basketball program. I don't know if I want to put money here, right? We're putting money into the basketball program and it's paying dividends, right? So salute to the staff and administration once again for their investment. I thought some of the major weaknesses of the 2023 basketball team, why they went from an Elite 8 team to a team that really struggled to get out of the first round of the tournament. Well, I mean, they didn't get out of the first, oh my God, struggled to get out of the first weekend of the tournament. They did get out of the first round, but I mean, they kind of let Colorado State come back at the end of that game. And then, Tennessee was just Tennessee, right? They were not the same team they were in 2022. And I think the biggest reasons for that were inconsistent outside shooting, right? A lot of open shots just not made and just a lot of outside shots, period, that we did not make. We were not great in that area this year on this basketball team. I think shaky guard and wing play, going from a team that had, some of the best guards in the country, one of the best wings in the country, and Timmy Allen, you just didn't get a lot of great play at that position last year, right? I mean, I think the only player that you could really expect any type of consistency from at those positions last season was Kendall Weaver. And it wasn't consistency like, yeah, Kendall Weaver will give us 15 points every night. It was consistency like Kendall Weaver will play hard, right? And I love Kendall Weaver. That's not a dig at him. I'm just saying playing hard can only get you so far, right? We need players to put the ball in the hole, right? And play hard. Can we get both? Is that too much to ask? Couldn't protect the ball and couldn't rebound, right? I really call those the 50-50 balls. Rebounds when they're in the air, they're 50-50 balls. Turnovers, right? Those are 50-50 balls. And Texas did not do a good job of, getting those opportunities or limiting those opportunities, right? Limiting turnovers is limiting 50-50 balls for the defense. And then lack of dynamic scoring, right? When you needed to score, when you needed a bucket, when you needed somebody to say, forget all the screens, like forget all the sets, forget everything. It's just one-on-one ISO. I'm better than you, 1-4 flat. I'm about to get a bucket. Who could really do that for the Texas basketball team last year? It seemed like, Max Asmus had to work crazy hard just to get a shot off last year, especially once conference play started. And then I think Dylan Dessou, was good. He was your best player, but you need a Robin, right? You can't just have a Batman. And I don't think that Max Asmus was Robin last year, right? And I also think that Dylan Dessou kind of wore out at the end of the year. Maybe he was hurt after the Baylor game and just decided to suck it up and stay on the floor and play basketball for the end of his college career at the University of Texas. But nonetheless, right, Max Asmus, was a dynamic scorer at times for Texas, but not consistently enough to move the needle. And Dylan Dessou did it for a large part of the season, but I think he wore out towards the end of the season, mostly because he didn't have somebody he could throw the ball to and say, go give us 20-25, right? Now you brought in a player like Jordan Pope, in addition to the other players that you brought in from the portal, Julian Larry, Jason Kent, and Tremont Mark. And I think you've done such a great job of answering all of those questions or trying to eliminate all of those concerns I just mentioned, right? All of those major weaknesses of the 2023 team, I think, have been answered, at least in some part, by the players that you've brought in this recruiting class and in this transfer portal. And Jordan Pope being the latest one, 17 points per game last year at Oregon State, transferring junior with 2 years of experience. I think he answers a lot of the question marks you had on the basketball team last year as well. He's a true lead guard that can allow Tremont Mark and Trey Johnson to play off the ball and focus on scoring while he handles the point guard duties, right? And does a good job of getting everybody where they're supposed to be, getting the offense lined up and getting everybody in their sets. Also had a 23% assist rate, right? So he's one of the best passers in the country last season, in addition to that 17 points per game. But because he averaged 17, you know, he can be your primary scorer on any given night, right? So any given night, it could be Trey Johnson. Any given night, it could be Tremont Mark. Any given night, it could be Jordan Pope, right? And I think that's how you build offenses, especially in the modern era. One of the most efficient players in the country in terms of scoring off the high ball screen, scoring coming off of off-ball screens, and catch and shoot opportunities. Those are the foundations of modern basketball, right? Scoring off the high ball screen, coming off screens to get a shot, right? And then catch and shoot, being spacing for your basketball team. Those are the foundations of modern basketball. Jordan Pope, one of the best in the country at all three. He's a Power 5 transfer, so you don't have to worry how his game will translate. I thought that was a big thing for Max Abmas last year, going from Oral Roberts to Big 12 basketball, right? Like, that's why he wore down when we got to conference play. It's just a huge jump, right? Oral Roberts to the best basketball conference in college basketball, a huge jump. And I don't think that for the better part of the season, especially at the end, it did Max Abmas any favors. I'm not sure you have to worry about that, even though the Big 12 is still a better conference than the Pac-12. That doesn't really matter because we're going to the SEC. But nonetheless, Jordan Pope has played 2 years at the Power 5 level. I don't think it'll be, any type of crazy transition for him to play in the SEC next year. And then the last thing is, it gives you arguably the most dangerous 3-guard lineup in college basketball, right? I'm not saying it's the best. I would have to do my research on that. But how many teams can give you 3 guards starting, right? Or just 3 guards better than Jordan Pope, Trey Johnson, and Tremont Mark, right? That list has to be 5 or less, right? I just don't see that many other teams in the country that can give you that type of 3-guard lineup night in and night out. And your top 5 guards / wings rival what you had on the Elite 8 team in 2022, right? Maybe not as good. I'm not here to say that. Marcus Carr, Tyrese Hunter, Serge-Ibaka Rice, Arterio Morris, and Timmy Allen, that's a hell of 5 players, right? That's a really, really good 5 players. But I think when you look at it now with Jordan Pope, Tremont Mark, Trey Johnson, Kendall Weaver, and Julian Larry, they at least have the potential to be as productive and as efficient as that 2022 team was on the guard and at the wings. And I think certainly it's an upgrade over what we had this past season when we didn't get out the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Congrats to all of our forever Longhorns over the next 3 days that will be drafted into the National Football League. And, of course, tomorrow we will be discussing what happens tonight in the first round. Hook 'em. Peace.